Here, all the heat transfer in the brewery is done with steam. We do treat the water. The most important thing about the water is it's consistent. It never changes, and so we know its chemical makeup, and so the treatment remains constant. This is heated overnight on a time clock. When the guys come in the morning, it's 75 degrees C, ready and waiting for them. The brewing process really begins down here. This is a mash tun. Hanging over the top of it is a grist case, and the point of this process is to extract fermentable sugars out of malted barley. The malt is loaded up into the grist case by hand. They carry 25 kilo bags up on their shoulder, drop them in the grist case. In the bottom of the grist case is a chute, clips into the bottom of it, that has an injector inside of it, and the malt drops through the chute, passes the injector, which is having hot liquor sprayed from the liquor tank up to it, and that mixes the hot liquor, the brewing water, with the malt, drops it into the mash tun. And it's left to steep for an hour, and in that time the sugars within the malt break down, and then the next thing to do is to wash that sugar out of the malt, and that's done by sparging. Straddling the mash tun, we have an arm that is driven by pumping more hot liquor from the liquor tank. That turns the arm sprays hot water liquor onto the grain bed, and at the same time we run the extract, which is known as brewer's wort, off into the underback, which is a stainless steel box, and then pumps the wort up into the copper. The process takes normally about 2 to 2.5 hours. Again, it's depending on the gravity of the beer. And then when we've got the right amount of extract up into the copper, we can start the boil, which is on this tank here with the chimney on it. The boil is always for an hour. During the boil, we can add charges of hops to the beer. It depends on the beer we're brewing. Once the boil is finished, the beer is then run out of the copper under gravity back into the underback, and it's then pumped on round the system, passes through a heat exchanger hanging up on the wall over there, which cools the beer in one pass from boiling to 20 degrees C, and then the beer is pitched into any one of the 6 fermenters that we have in the brewery. And then the yeast is added. That's a brewing day. It takes about 9 man hours. Once they've done that, they have to get in the mash tun, dig all the malt out. That's bagged up and goes away for cattle feed. The hops are dug out. That goes away for compost. Once we got the beer into the fermenter, we're then into fermentation. So the yeast has been pitched on, and the yeast will start to feed on the sugars in the beer. When yeast is fermenting, you get heat being generated, so the beer will actually increase in temperature. Normally you would expect to see a rise in temperature of between 4 and 5 degrees centigrade. At this brewery we cask condition, so the beer goes from the fermenter and its primary fermentation straight into the casks, and the secondary fermentation takes place in the cask. Whenever we brew beer and the beer's racked out of the tank, it's got to go straight into casks, which means you need a lot of casks for your secondary fermentation. Then they go into the cellar, and our cellar's running at 14 degrees centigrade. So the beer has been cooled to 8, it goes into the cellar and it warms up. There's still live yeast in this beer. So once it warms up, it starts to ferment again. So now we're back into those byproducts of fermentation again. You get heat. Well, that's negated because the cellar's temperature controlled. There's much less viable yeast, so it's not going to ferment really aggressively, so heat doesn't come into play. In here, it's really important. It's a brim-filled cask. So as the beer ferments and it produces carbon dioxide, that gas has got nowhere to go, and so it's forced into the beer. And then you can see it in the beer there. That's the gas. It's naturally produced and gives the beer its condition, which is really important because nobody likes flat beer, do they?